No, awesome. Sanny, Clay, so great to have you on the podcast. Your love story. Give us the sneak peek behind this love story. You guys were at a university together in the land of the Zulus in KwaZulu-Natal. Is that where this love story begins? How did it actually start?
No, yeah, it's correct
You
that
can
we're
say yes.
together at that university. Yeah, I think we could say yes and no at the same time. So there were yes, we met there and we knew each other from UKZN, but there was uh,
There was no courting
no
or
no
relationship
coaching or relationship.
or
It
interest.
was seeing as a sister from home. You know, you're away from home. You want to collect everyone from Guyana as much as possible, so you can feel like we're.
Mm.
Okay, so then this
Yes.
happened in Joburg. So what changed? What did you see in Joburg that you didn't see in KZN?
I think probably timing. It's a timing issue situation. In KZN, there was different focus. So I was one of those that went to varsity, and my focus was to study.
That's the right focus.
And I wanted the degree. I think it's different circumstances. So I was the only one from home studying at that time, and my father had passed on. So I'm the only person that needs to make things happen, and I didn't want to lose focus. So it was a decision that I won't start a relationship unless God spoke to me while I was still a student. And lucky enough, God didn't speak. So I started.
Wow, that is actually a very, very mature decision to make at that at that young age. But no, it's always good to to sneak behind the curtain and hear some of these love stories and how they started. While we don't have the answer yet about how this love story necessarily started, but we are getting some hints that it's not in KZN, it's actually in Joburg. The thing that changed, from a sister to a wife remains a question mark. But for now, welcome everyone to our incredible podcast where we discuss all things parenting. This is the Let's Parent podcast. We really kind of go behind, the shallow end when it comes to parenting, and we deep dive to understand the journeys of different parents. How are they doing it? What are some of the challenges? And for some of us that are much earlier in our parenting journeys, to glean from that wisdom and to add it into our own lives. So today we are joined by Hlayiseka and Sanny. We're a married couple with three wonderful children, one a teen, a preteen, and I guess toddlerish, type of young one as well. So we're really looking forward to hearing their journey. So, Sanny, just tell us about your children, and maybe in kind of talking to each one, introducing them to us, and just their age in particular. Can you maybe give us a sense of something that really stands out about them that makes them uniquely them?
I'll start. So we've got a 15-year-old girl, and sure, what can I say about her? I think through the stages of growth, they sort of evolve. She was super active at some point, and now she's like calm. I think it's probably it's reserved. Probably the being a big sister in the house, deputy parent, as she calls herself sometimes. And then we've got second born, who is outspoken.
Very.
And yeah, it's just also outspoken. And then we've got the young man, 6-year-old, who is super active. I think, is active, and is very curious about things.
Mm. That's very interesting. It's a nice kind of distribution of different ages, across the board. So obviously, I mean, 15 years of parenting, that's a journey. That's quite a long while to get them to where they are. And you mentioned that your first daughter she's kind of changed, from whether outgoing to now more reserved, a little bit more responsible as well. How do you think about the discipline journey through the years? 'Cause I think the key conversation we really want to deep dive into is just discipline. Like I look at myself now and look at my child. My youngest child is 11 months old. And I don't know, at this age, they understand nothing. Is there even room for discipline? Like, how do you think about discipline through those different ages and those different stages that your children are at?
Sure. For the 15-year-old, I think we are at a place where we can talk to her and try to explain, even for the 11-year-old. Even to an extent, the 6-year-old, the discipline is about explaining why something is wrong and why we are disciplining. But according to us and what we've learned, from the age of 2, they can understand when they've done something wrong, you can discipline them. So even though we still use the rod, but as they grow older, we want to reduce that. And some of the kids, I think the second borns are very good. I'm also a second born myself, are very good at flying under the radar. So they come in, there's already a sibling, and they can observe what the other sibling is disciplined for. And most of the times, they don't do the exact same thing. So our second born hardly gets disciplined for what her sister gets disciplined for, because already she's mastered that. So it's only her own things that she does that are wrong that she gets disciplined for. So it depends also on the maturity of the child. So if the child is mature enough, then it's easier to just talk to them and explain. For example, Rulani, the youngest, the youngest, he is very active and he can do things. But when you explain to him, he's very quick to understand. And also one thing, is very quick to apologize. So when he says it's wrong, he's very quick to apologize. So disciplining him, even though he's 6, it's easier because he easily sees the wrong, even though next time he may repeat. But he's very quick to see he's wrong and apologizes and he tries to fix. And most of the times, especially with me, his mom is very sweet and loving and caring. So at different age and also the maturity of the child
Yeah,
or temperament.
that is actually really interesting. I mean, you've already touched on some specific ways of thinking through the discipline, from a physical type of approach to a communication type of style, depending on the age and the maturity of the child. But maybe to step back a little bit, when we discipline, why do we actually discipline? Because I think there's a school of thought in the modern world that let children do what children want to do, and we shouldn't be disciplining them. They will kind of figure it out, right? Why must we actually discipline? Why is this an important discussion?
I think discipline is part of teaching. It's part of training, if I can put it that way. Yeah, and I think one of the major roles that we need to play in our children's lives is to train them in how to live. So discipline is part of it, if I can put it that way, because you want a certain outcome, you will train, and if they're not getting what they're trained to do, or they transgress, I think I think maybe to put it in a simpler, it's a biblical thing. You teach that if there's a transgression, there's consequences for it. It's something that they will meet later in life, and they might not be given a chance where they are set down to be taught, or anyone explains to them. But it's a principle that they need to learn when they're still young, that when you live your life and you're older, there is consequences for your actions.
Yes.
Which might not necessarily be physical punishment where you get beaten up, or restricted on certain things, which some of these things might be lifelong consequences that you go through.
Yeah.
So it's basically training for life. It's part of training for life.
That is very interesting. So is discipline about keeping them out of jail? Like, like is the because now if they're not disciplined now, they go do it out there. They end up in consequences where they end up in jail. They end up in a fight, whatever the case is. Is that what we want to avoid? Is this like what is the fundamental goal? What is the ultimate goal that we want to get them towards? I think keeping them out of jail is a good idea, but is there anything more as the fundamental goal there?
No, keeping up them out of jail, yes, it's a good idea. I don't think there's a parent who wants their child to end up in jail. And sometimes we do tell our kids that some of these things can end you up in jail. But as my husband was saying, they need to understand that for every action there's a consequence. But also, remember, foolishness is found in a child, and a rod of discipline drives it out. So there's no child who comes to the world wise. None of us come to the world wise, but discipline drives out the foolishness so that wisdom remains. And that wisdom they need also for their lives, for their life choices. And some of the consequences may be as big as losing your life prematurely. So that's why it's very to train them from a young age to say you need to be disciplined, and not just disciplined as you're being punished, but you need to have a discipline in yourself so that you can live and actually fulfill the purpose of why you're here. You don't want to die prematurely. Going to jail, maybe we may prevent it, we may not. Maybe it could be a path for them. Maybe they would learn something from it. But if it can be prevented, let it be prevented. There are some things, consequences that are not necessary if there's discipline. That's why I don't believe in that notion of let kids do whatever. And as I said, foolishness is bound up in a child, and a rod of discipline drives it out. And it's not necessarily using smacking, spanking, and hitting the child. That's why we say even explaining. Some kids respond, for example, to naughty corner. But we know our answer, whenever you respond to naughty corner, should go to naughty corner and sing. Should go to naughty corner and sing. So like naughty corner is not working for her. So you need to also find what works for the child. But as the child grows up, talking to the child and also restricting some of the things that they love is a form of discipline. They need that.
That's interesting.
For them.
So it's a big toolbox of options. Do you use the personality of the child to determine what works? Like, if this naughty corner works for your second born, does that become then the primary thing? If the speaking a lot more, explaining works for your third born, does that become the primary thing? Is that kind of how you think about it with the different personalities of children? I've always been concerned, at this stage with smaller children to say, well, if we apply different discipline methods to different children based on their personality, maybe they might interpret that as favoritism, in their small minds. Like, is this something that you've encountered, and how have you thought about it?
So yeah, that's correct. We use different methods for the different kids. I think with age it becomes easier. So we explain. So there's a lot of talking, and sometimes it's not a conversation that we have when we are disciplining the kids. It will be a general conversation. One of the days we're sitting, maybe playing a game or eating, where we explain that there are things that we do in a certain way towards a certain child, and it's because of their personality. So it's not brought up when someone is in trouble. We mention it when there's no issues, no one has done anything wrong, and they usually, because they're all relaxed, they understand. There's always that element where you get disciplined, where you will want to, even if you're using the same methods for all of them, one of them might claim that you are harsh on them. So yeah, I think it's just a human nature to want to accuse and to so we do. them. We definitely don't use the same method for each one of them.
That's very interesting. I've not heard even that concept to say, while you are sitting in a relaxed way, like explain to them why we actually do this for this one versus that one versus that one. This is really, really interesting. So I'm taking a lot of notes as we're having this particular conversation. But in this conversation, you guys have quoted two biblical references. So one might argue that God is a God of love. It's all about love. How do you balance, the God of love and the discipline? Well, one perhaps expects the expression of love to look a particular way, and then discipline doesn't always feel like love. How do you balance that in terms of building up, this family of faith, and then also being quite disciplined in how this actually plays out?
I actually wanted to quote a scripture, in Proverbs 22, verse 6, where it says, train up your child in the way of the Lord, so when they're older, they won't depart from it. And just one of the things that I've done, we've tried to do. I think sometimes you get lost in that process. We as Christian parents, I do discipleship with my kids. So we've got the tools 1-to-1, which is one of the tools we use at church. I've gone through it with Zako. I've gone through it with Melo with no much progress because of exams and all that. And for me, the main reason for that is I want them to hear about God from me, not from someone else somewhere, or to hear about religion or faith from their parents. So I sit down with them and go through the discipleship process with them, which for me is an important thing because this home is where we set the foundations. And you want them to be rooted in what you believe, which for us is God. And to have the opportunity to ask questions. We here. So if I explain something to her and it makes sense today, but tomorrow it doesn't make sense, she can come back to me and ask, can you clarify on this and this? So for us, it's important that as a family you disciple your kids. Yeah.
There's somebody listening that doesn't know what discipleship is. This is a big word that you've now kind of introduced us to, and this discipleship process. Maybe just give us 30 seconds to explain that. I know, Sanny, you wanted to add. Maybe just explain that as part of that edition as well.
Or should I add? Okay. So discipleship is basically training someone in a certain way. So when we say we are discipling somebody into Christ, we're training them into the ways of Christ and taking them through the principles of Christ and there's faith that you're in. And from our side, in terms of balancing that God is a God of love, but also remembering that God is a God of love and He can also meet tough love, what we refer to as tough love. And scriptures do tell us that God disciplines us because He loves us. So discipline is part of our faith, but also God being a God of love is merciful. So one thing that I always stress with my kids is I will discipline, but also I will show mercy. I think there was one day, I don't remember what the big one had done. And I said to her, I am going to decide to show you mercy. Because also I knew there was a lesson in that. She had done wrong, but I was like, I am not going to punish you. I'm going to decide to show you mercy. So also remembering that God is a God of justice. He is loving. And because He's loving, He's a God of justice. And because He's loving, also is a God of mercy. He balances mercy with justice. And we know as Christians that we also need to be merciful. Blessed are the merciful, because then they will receive mercy as well. So it's about that. And also, even if it feels like it's not love, you must be able to show them love. And also in the discipline, we don't discipline angry. So it's not about, okay, I'm so angry at you, so I'm going to punish you. So it's about, let me show you the right way. And when I'm angry, I'm going to step away. So I cool down. So it's not about my anger. is about the right thing that you need to do. So it doesn't feel like, oh, now it's this big punishment and now I'm not being loved. So we always make sure that our kids know that they're loved. Yes, mistakes can be made here and there where they feel like they're not loved, but we also do our best to make sure that they know that they're loved. Yeah.
No, that is a lot of information. Whew, we are having an amazing discussion here on the podcast. We'll definitely need to have a future discussion on this topic of discipleship. I thought we were talking discipline, but it turns out there's another side of this, which is called discipleship, which we really didn't anticipate, but here we are. Wow. But I think now, kind of in stepping back, your personalities, do you guys have similar personalities to each other? Because I find that sometimes you have to negotiate the different personalities between yourself and your spouse in order to negotiate the way of disciplining and agreeing. Can you talk us through that journey on, did you guys ever have a sit down and agree, this is how we're going to do, this is what we're not going to do? Were there any differences in personalities that caused any clashes that you had to figure out how to work through as part of figuring out this discipline thing?
Yes, so there's been a sit down, but the sit down didn't really iron out all the things. I think as case by case, it reveals where you stand and how you understand the discipline. But what we've done is that in our differences, we correct each other away from the kids.
Mm.
So so there's been differences that we had not spoken about because they didn't come up when we're talking. And what happens is then we sit later, reflect, and we then decide on how we handle such situations going forward. And what we've done, I think, which is important also in front of the kids, is to have a united front.
Mm.
So if I feel that my wife is not disciplining correctly according to me or my thinking, I would support. I won't dispute. We'll sort it out. I think the understanding is that your wife or your husband is doing it to discipline the kids. They're not trying to kill them.
Yeah.
And if you have that understanding, you'll also extend grace to the
But
spouse.
you are so
Yes.
Say,
Changan, hey?
might not.
That's such a Changan thing to say. You're not, Changans and vendors, you guys have extremes in how you actually speak. But no, sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
Okay, I am Shangan.
Yes.
So we extend grace, understanding that this person might not be doing it correctly, but their heart is to make sure our kids grow in the way of the Lord.
Yeah.
And we'll let the mistakes happen as long as they're not killing the child, and we'll talk later. But I think the main it's let them be disciplined, and yeah.
And then the trust as well. Saying the trust is he loves his kids enough and he's got enough self-control to see if he's gone too far. Like one situation where I saw that, okay, this is moving to the angry side, but he had enough self-control. I had to step back. I didn't try to stop him. No, but he had enough self-control to say, I'm angry now, let me walk away. So that trust is. And in terms of personalities, our personalities are not the same. we are we are opposite.
Is it?
I'm a sanguine, so I'm extroverted. He's more introverted. So, but discipline is not around your personalities. Discipline is one thing that is agnostic, is personality agnostic. We all, as human beings, need to have it and receive it. So whether I'm more extroverted and I'm the one who's the entertainer of the family, when it's time for discipline, it's time for discipline. What has been common, I think, for us is we came from homes that are disciplined. It's coming from Limpopo. If a thing that's not right, your mother will be on your case. It was mainly mothers because the fathers would be at work. So mothers would do the disciplining. But also when dad comes back from work, if mom has tried to discipline you and you didn't listen, dad comes back from work, you know you're gonna get it. So yeah, we came from those homes, Christian homes, where discipline was a good thing. So we knew when we got together that discipline is also going to be one thing in our home. And as it says, even if we didn't agree the way the other is doing the discipline, it's not about me trying to stop him and say, don't do that to my child. Sometimes my heart may be breaking a bit, but I will wait for an opportunity to say, but they should have done this. Those moments are not many. Many. There are not many times. It's not just about only a united front. Most of the times, we agree on the principle that the other parent is trying to discipline the child and not trying to kill the child. And we're trying to. We're not going to try to destroy our child. Even when we speak, sometimes you may not say the correct or right words, but even the words coming out of the parent's mouth is not about destroying the child. They may not come out right, but later we can go and correct. But the idea is to correct.
I told you guys these people are Zonga. I was just guessing, but now you can hear they confessed themselves. So that's really quite interesting. I think, sometimes I guess there is an assumption of how the discipline should play out within the home. But I think that sitting down and agreeing as a couple is really quite important. And that's what I'm picking up. And also having that openness to say, well, even though we've not agreed in this point, to not treat that point with an unnecessary judgment, but to have a conversation outside afterwards to say, okay, let's align on that particular one that we have not agreed on before. So that's really interesting. And I think to get a little bit tactical in this conversation, so would you recommend that people get to the extent of being specific to say, we will, withhold TV privileges. So no watching TV. We will take away devices. We will do the quiet corner, etc. Or is it more at the principles level in which the agreement takes place?
Yeah, we haven't had a discussion where we're very specific. I think it's on a principle level. And the reason for that, it's 3 kids, different personalities, and different ways we discipline them. It would be a very long meeting.
Okay. Yeah. No, but that makes sense. And I think it's important because I think I could be listening to you now as a younger parent taking notes, then thinking, okay, I need to now sit down with my wife and make a list of 20 things of what we're going to discipline, like this, like that, like that, like that. But it's more at that principled, kind of level. This really makes sense. Sandy, you mentioned earlier in terms of the homes of origin, you both came from homes where discipline was actually important. Can you give us, one thing that you didn't see in your highly disciplined home that you have brought into, your discipline style to kind of enrich it, and so forth? And maybe, Kai, from your end, something that you haven't brought into, your discipline style because it really doesn't apply anymore. The laws have changed. Things don't work that way anymore. I don't know. Whatever the reason being is, there are things that you have kept, that you've modified, and there are things that you've discarded kind of completely.
Just thinking, growing up in the rural Limpopo, the way of discipline was the rod. It was, even though my mother she was a merciful person, and so she wouldn't just discipline you for the sake. She wouldn't just hit you for the sake of hitting you. So I particularly wasn't hit that much. So I cannot say I'm that child that my mother used to hit. But also, as I said, I'm a second born. So I knew how to fly under the radar. So whenever I saw my sister was beaten for something, oh, she's beaten for that, fly under the radar. So one thing we didn't have things like naughty corner. We didn't have things like taking away privileges like your cell phone. You're not gonna watch TV or taking away privileges. So for us, if you did wrong, your mother would either tell you, but not in a nice way, or you'd get the rod, which I didn't get. I didn't get. I was told a lot, and also I think for me, my blessing was going to boarding school early. So my mother didn't experience my teenage years that much. She would experience them during holidays. I'd come back holidays, and I'd be that child who sits at home. So I would hardly get scolded for going and coming back late. But yeah, most of the times, if push came to shove, it was the road. But it wasn't done in a way where I felt like, you know what, now she wants to kill me. And yeah, so I've introduced things because I'm like, it's not necessary all the time to use the rod to hit the child. It should be a last resort for me. So for me, I always even remind my kids, I'm like, when was the last time I hit you? And they're like, no, we don't remember. So because I don't want it to be an everyday thing, I should be able to speak to them. I should be able to show them that this is wrong, and they listen. But then when it comes to a point where you have to use the rod, I use that. But I use the other methods before I use the rod.
Sure. That's a tricky one. So for me, you know, my dad worked away from home. So most of the discipline would be done by mom, and dad would discipline when he's back, you know, but it was not, so I didn't see the collaboration, if I can put it that way, of both. So I knew dad would discipline. So this is one area where I had to intentionally think through to say, I'm here with these kids every day. And my involvement in discipline shouldn't be that they get scared of me. Usually you have families where when a child does something wrong, the mom says, I'll tell daddy when they come back.
Wait for daddy to come back.
So we do not do that, and intentionally, because we don't want the other parent to be seen as the bad one, you know, for the children. Yeah. So yeah, it's a tricky one for me. I was not a problem child growing up. Yeah, and I was the child that sits at home and do schoolwork, and we look after goats, look after cattle when you grow up a bit. But yeah, so the only discipline moment I remember was that once even where I got hit. But other than that, I think I was child number 3. So I think also
You were
I would watch the
under the
other 2.
radar.
Like under 2 levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an incredible conversation with Hlayiseka and Sanny on their amazing parenting journey as they have gone through the discipline phases from the talking to the physical kind of consequence to the withholding, and really kind of giving us a good sense that, you know, it's not just one toolbox that we use for this discipline thing. It's actually a multiplicity of things that we can use depending on the personality of the child. And I think quite importantly, what I'm taking away is that as a couple, agree and collaborate. Don't operate, you know, as independent kind of forces when it comes to this discipline thing. So that's really quite a lot of wisdom, you know, for us to carry through. I think, Sanny, Hlayiseka, in closing, can you both share your proudest moment, you know, in disciplining, that if you were to repeat a discipline moment, you feel like, yeah, no, here I really disciplined, I see the fruit, everything is working out well. You know, this is the story that you are ready to pull out of the back of your pocket when you want to explain, you know, just you know, how well you have really done in this discipline game, even though the journey is still long ahead. But do you have proud moments that you can both just share, one sort of brief moment that you were really proud of the way that you disciplined?
Interesting one. We need to pull from the archives.
Yeah, we're going
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, or even say,
I
or
think
even
one
the
of
fruit,
the
right? You can see like a fruit now
yeah.
where you see like, wow, actually, now that I look at it, because sometimes you don't really feel that your efforts are making much difference in the child's life when you interact with them every day, but you get those sparks where you like see, you're like, okay, maybe I am on the right track. Maybe I'm doing something that it's going in. Have there been those kind of moments?
I think one of them it's seeing the kids looking at us, knowing that each one will discipline, and if it's a wrong thing, we'll get the same kind of discipline from both parents. So there's no moments where they would run to the other one. If they've done wrong, they know it's the same standard both. For me, it's something that they will probably pick up and grow with it. As they have their families later in life. One of the moments I think Sunny mentioned, where I got upset, and it's something that we shouldn't do when you discipline your child. You shouldn't be upset, because then the emotions take over. It's no longer love. It's you expressing your anger, and just remembering that somehow I was able to stop myself and realize I'm actually angry. I'm not disciplining this child from a, a loving a loving heart. And taking that moment where I walked out, and I literally walked out, drove out of the estate.
Yeah.
I think for like an hour or two, and then came back later. And my attitude had changed when I come back, because I was no longer upset. It's still the same offense that was made, but now the discipline changes, because you're not angry. So that's one of the moments that, so for me, if I was to give advice, is do not discipline your child when you're angry.
Don't
Yeah.
discipline when angry. That's really a good one. No, awesome.
Yeah.
Sunny, a short one from your end as Hlayiseka thinks of a song to close this podcast off in. I didn't mention to you guys, as our audience, that this couple are actually musicians. So they have been playing music for a long, long time. So whenever you see them, they are singing, playing keys, and so forth. I don't know whether it's true or not, but a little birdie has told me that they've prepared a little rendition for us to close off the podcast today. So, Sunny, your reflection.
Oh my goodness. So for myself, I am proud of myself when I don't have to use force to discipline the child. So it's about showing them what's right, what's wrong, and where they've gone wrong, and being redemptive in my discipline. So when I have shown them that this is the way to go, and also extending that mercy. So for me, it always feels good when I've extended mercy, when I've shown them you are wrong here, but then because you're my child, I'll also extend mercy to show you love and just explain that this is something not to be repeated. For me, that's a proud moment. I don't have to be using force, and I think children learn better when it's not force that's being used. And also teaching them, like we're saying, discipling them. Sometimes I take the girls for a walk and I ask them questions. And I know as I ask them questions and also add to the explanation and clarify things, that's a moment of teaching them. So instead of having to now later discipline, teaching them also is a good thing. And then discipline just comes as correction here and there, and not all the time you're disciplining, but teaching first before you can discipline. For me, it's the
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. What an incredible, incredible segment. What an incredible couple. What an incredible journey. We've learned so much out of this. So, Tlai, Sunny, thank you again. We are so grateful for your time. This has been another episode of our Let's Parent podcast. Look out for more episodes upcoming where we continue to delve deep into the journey of parenting and everything that actually surrounds it. Thank you.